Hello, and welcome to this installment of Catch Up, where we talk with an expert in the insurance field about issues that impact property owners and touch on insurance. I'm very pleased to be joined today by my good friend, Sarah Parker with Parker Public Adjusting, based in Minnesota, but keeping her eyes on the national picture, particularly raising the roof on problems with roof damage claims. Sarah, welcome to Catch Up, and thank you so much for sharing some of your expertise with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to contribute.
If a homeowner or a business owner comes to you, your company, and says, gosh, the last storm really walloped us and our roof was fine, but now it's not fine. How do you help them set expectations about what they can expect when they file an insurance claim for roof damage today?
Absolutely. It's one of those things like technically there may not be the exact same protocol that you're going through with your insurer, but there's definitely some themes. I'd say number one is make sure that you're active in the claim at all times. When we as consumers think about our insurance policies, we don't think of it as a contract. I certainly did not before I became a public insurance adjuster. And most of us read contracts before we sign them. It's just one of those things. It's just not something we think of. So I would say, as a claimant, that's what you are when you make a claim. It's important to just be active in your claim. And when you're active in your claim, you're aware, you're following up. It really can help things a lot, especially when you don't know exactly how your claim is going to go. Typically, once you make a claim, let's say you notice that there's something wrong with your roof, or you've had some kind of severe weather event and you just go to check and you're like, I think there's definitely something wrong here, there's damage. After you make your claim, and that can be on the phone or in writing, depending on how your policy works. Once you do that, your insurance company is going to send out an adjuster typically, and that can be a staff adjuster or what we call an independent adjuster. And they both work for insurance companies. Independent adjusters might work for many, especially when they have a busy time. If there's been a big storm and there's lots of homes affected. So they'll typically send someone out to your property to take a look and everything. And this is where it's a really good idea to consider either choosing your own contractor that you're comfortable working with, or taking photos, doing your own documentation of some sort, in addition to working with this adjuster.
Yes. My sense is they're not that with a roof claim, they're going to have somebody out there to take a physical look. Is that a fair guess?
With your roof, it's really important to have somebody competent to get in there, get documentation, check it out. Also safely doing it. Usually having a professional is a great idea.
We work with the Minnesota Department of Insurance, and they have been reporting an increase in consumer complaints around roof claims. We also understand that insurers are really trying to clamp down on what they will pay and trying to put limits on whether they pay to replace the entire roof. My understanding is there have been disputes between property owners and insurers for quite a while over whether the insurance company owes to replace shingles that weren't damaged but are required to restore a uniform and consistent appearance to the roof, right? So insurers have been saying, hey, we're not going to pay to fix it if it ain't broke. And if it's a patchwork appearance, I'm sorry. And of course, from our perspective as policyholder advocates, we say, hey, that affects the property value, right? A roof that doesn't have a consistent appearance is not as attractive. Where are we on that now?
It's an interesting thing. I'm glad you brought up the state of Minnesota. A lot of people are not aware that most states participate in a national database of sending state complaints that they get from consumers for insurance to a national database. 20% increase in complaints was what the department had reported. I believe it was a year or two ago. I was shocked. And it was primarily for roofing claims. So it's very interesting. So there's a couple of reasons. The reasons why, that's a bit more nuanced, probably a bit boring for consumers to learn about, but there's definitely been an increase in, as we see climate change, as we see more natural disasters, there just is a market increase in hail and wind claims in general. And of course, you're damaging more roofs. There's been an increase over the years of these type of claims, and whenever there's an increase in a type of claim, typically then you'll start to see limitations start to come into policies. And some of these limitations are optional too. So that's why United Policyholders has some wonderful resources on shopping for insurance in the first place. Check those out after you watch this. Each policy is unique, even across different insurance carriers, different states. Even if your neighbor has the same insurance company as yours, you could have different coverage. So it's important to review your policy. However, most policies owe for something called a pre-loss condition. And most people think of appearance immediately, and that is certainly a consideration. Absolutely a consideration. If your roof was a uniform appearance before, it's very reasonable to expect that your coverage, and again, you have to review your policy, would also restore your roof as part of that restoration. But another consideration that people may not realize, because most of us are not roofers, a roof is a whole system. It's not just you have some shingles here, you have vents here, you have some things here. It's a uniform system. That's why roofers are licensed in many states, especially Minnesota. That's why they have to go through, when they go through the license, they have to study building codes. It is a system, and that system is meant to have water shedding. And so it's not meant to be watertight, but it needs to shed water appropriately. And to do that, you need to put it all on at once. So what happens when you patch it? You're creating a maintenance issue that was never there before. So if you're adding any patching, that is adding maintenance, which is a detriment and less than pre-loss condition. So it's something to think about.
Insurers have gotten a little tougher on how they will adjust a roof damage claim. They will sometimes balk at replacing undamaged shingles in order to restore the home to a uniform and consistent appearance, but a policyholder can argue for that, right? And the law in Minnesota is that the insurer should match, correct?
It's like case law. So I'll give a preface with, I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice. We do have case law, according to my attorneys, that is well documented, that owes for reasonable uniform appearance. Now, if you have something called a matching exclusion, then you might not get that right. So it's important to review your policy because it often is optional. It's either optional by carrier, where some insurance companies do not have an actual matching exclusion, or they have a standard matching exclusion, but you can purchase, depending on what your agent is able to sell you, to sell the option to purchase limited matching for roofing and siding. So you might want to, that's why it's important, again, review United Policyholders materials on purchasing insurance, because your agents are really busy. They might not remember to tell you, oh, you can buy matching. So it's very important to be aware of those things. A lot of them are optional.
I understand there's something called the Shingle Locator Service, SLS, that State Farm participates in, or did they? What is it? What's the Shingle Locator Service? Why would does a homeowner need to know about that? Does it matter to a homeowner?
Yeah, it's not going to be exciting to a homeowner, but you definitely should know about it. I'm probably more of a roof enthusiast than most normal people, but what's important is, so SLS is the Shingle Locator Service. The purpose of it is, it sounds like a third-party service. It is simply a service arm of State Farm. State Farm owns it, they run it. Okay. State Farm used to typically use a company called ITEL. There's many companies, NTS, ITEL. If you have a competent roofer who's very familiar with shingles, they can even identify them with you without those, but typically those are the most expedient. The reason why this is important is there's nothing wrong with State Farm having an internal department. Cost savings and being able to get this information quickly to policyholders is a beautiful thing. The only thing that concerns me, just based on my professional experience, is I see a lot of false matches to the materials. And the reason why this matters is because if you have a shingle that is no longer available, whether that be they discontinued a color, you don't have your Harvest Gold anymore, whatever that looks like, they discontinued a color, or that manufacturer that created the shingles for your roof maybe changed a product line where it also is no longer compatible by actual dimensions. Which again, your roof is one system, so you don't want to mix and match. Be like having socks 2 different sizes or boots 2 different sizes, and the rain gets in one boot but not the other. You want to avoid that. That's my only concern, is that it is an internal department that, again, I've often seen a lot of false positives. One example, a recent one, is GAF is a very common shingle manufacturer across the United States. And they had a shingle called Timberline HD. And just a little bit ago, they changed it to Timberline HDZ, and they changed dimensions and many things about the shingle. So it's no longer compatible. However, when I started adjusting claims after this change happened with that manufacturer, then I noticed that TEL sometimes and then the SLS very often identified some of my insured's roofs were 20 years old, some installed in 2008 even, but they were being identified as the new product. So that's again why you really want to be active in your own claim. The convenience is beautiful, and it's helpful that insurance companies are offering, they're sending out a person for you, they're valuing their loss for you and sending you a check, they're identifying materials. But remember, it's like the IRS. Would you want the IRS to do your taxes for you? They may not be thinking about all of the allowances that are available for your taxes. Same thing with your insurance claim. You just want to be active and informed as a consumer so that you're making sure that you're getting the coverage that your policy owes rather than what the most convenient assembly line of protocol is.
Right. And it's your home, right? For most people, their home is their biggest asset. Same thing with an independent business owner.
Yeah.
And so it's really in your best interest to make sure that it gets repaired properly, that it gets restored to its pre-loss condition as close as possible. And sometimes you do have to fight. And of course, United Policyholders is here to help people be their own best advocates. But a lot of times, with something like a roof claim, they do need to get professional help. That's the kind of work that you do. But and I don't want to pick on State Farm too much more, but there's one more
Right.
thing that we've been hearing about that I was hoping you would explain. And again, the way insurance companies advertise, it's a warm and snuggly blanket we're putting around you that's going to keep you warm, and it's really
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about anything because we got you, right? We got you.
Yeah.
But of course, you and I know, and a lot of people learn the hard way, that when you have a claim of any kind of significant dollar amount, suddenly it's nothing like the warm and fuzzy. It's a cold, hard contract written by a lawyer, and the
Yeah.
insurance company is bringing their arsenal of weapons to get their way. And then there's the property owner saying, hey, you're not living in this home. I am. I've got all my equity here. I need this house to be really as strong as it was before this event. One of the things we're hearing about is State Farm balking, not wanting to pay for all the costs associated with a repair job. I think the phrase is interfering trades. Can you talk to us a little bit
Yeah.
about that? And that seems like it's yet another new creative way to jam people, which we're not happy to hear about.
Yeah, so I would say for most consumers, you're probably going to go through one or two claims in your lifetime, and that's a good thing. We don't want to increase claims, but for someone like me that sees, I can't tell you how many claims I've seen between my actual professional work and then my national volunteering for consumer advocacy. The thing is, there's different determinations of how to repair things, how to value repairs, and then coverage. So you're coming up against a bunch of things. And when you're working with your agent, we love agents, we love our brokers, but just remember they're the sales department. They often do not see how the claims department applies the actual language in your policy for coverage. So they don't know about the claims process.
Right.
And then all of a sudden the claims department comes in and you get like these 3 or 4 page letters with legal language and reservation of rights, and you need to elect for replacement cost coverage within 180 days. And you're just like, what does this mean?
Say what now?
Actual cash value? It's a lot. You're learning legal language, you're learning contract law, but just remember, you are a claimant, and since your policy is a contract, you are now in contract negotiations once you file a claim. Although for us, it's very emotional. It's our home, it's our livelihood. We're already busy. It's not like we have extra time to sit on hold of the claims department or work on a claim or climb our roofs.
Right.
You just have to be cognizant of that you are now in contract negotiations. So that's why the shift happens, and they're not going to have that emotional investment in it, it is a business thing that you're in.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing.
So what's the deal with interfering trades?
Interfering trades. So I touched on that there's three things that you come up against when you're in a claim. One of them, is it covered?
Right.
What's covered? How much of it is covered if it's covered? The other thing is, how do we fix it? And then the third thing is, how much does it cost to fix it?
Right.
So within how much does it cost to fix it, there's something called overhead and profit. Now, within case law, state to state, within policies, when overhead and profit is owed varies widely. But in a retail scenario, it's typically just built into your price. You don't see it. It's just in there, right? You get your price, you get your payment schedule in a retail scenario. But when it comes to insurance claims, when you get your actual, it's called an estimate. When you get your estimate for your settlement, for your first insurance claim check, it's going to be a bunch of little lines. It's going to look like another language to you, okay? And it's not going to be written like a retail contractor would write it in plain language. It's not going to say shingles, new roof, this much money. It's going to sometimes be 50 to 200 line items just for your roof. So you're coming up against that. And in that overhead and profit, because in insurance claims, we typically are often, just because of Xactimate or Symbility and a couple of other estimating programs that insurance companies use, they will typically spell out every line item, and one of them is overhead and profit. And the thing is, a lot of policies do not even address what that means, or when it's owed, when it's not owed. So typically when something is not spelled out in a policy, that's where you're sometimes going to see, more often than not, disputes. It's going to probably be on something that's not addressed in the policy, or when you have conflicting views about what that coverage means. And so that's when guidelines come into play. And guidelines are just the playbook of how insurance companies, remember we talked about that assembly line of protocol. You don't want to get caught up in that. You want to file your own taxes, you want to be in your own claim, right? When you get into those guidelines, sometimes the guidelines are not always congruent, or they'll just make some stuff up about what the coverage means when it doesn't actually say that. And so typically you'll see a 3 trade rule in guidelines, again, not in a policy, which means if you have 3 different trades, then overhead and profit is owed. Some carriers have complexity. So if there's complexity and multiple trades in general, then it's owed. But now we're seeing just an argument. It's come out of nowhere. It's not anything I've ever actually seen in construction. Now, I am from rural Canada, so I know about construction. It's cold weather construction. You have to build things right. You have to know it. When it's coming to this interfering trades, it's nothing I have ever seen in retail construction. It's not a thing. I don't know where it came from. And there's also no yardstick or measurement for it. It's not in a policy. And from where I've seen it and where it's being reported to me, it doesn't sound like some of the representatives for the claims department even have a congruent definition for what interfering trades means.
There are tricks that insurers may roll out to pay you less than what it's actually going to cost you to pay a competent professional who has insurance, who's going to do the job right, to put your roof back the way it was before the loss. We certainly hope your claim doesn't go bad, but we are here to identify some of the potholes that are on the road that you want to try to steer clear of, and at least that they're there. But they're not the only insurer that is playing hardball on roof claims. Is there another example of a brand name carrier that is rolling out some other creative way of not paying full value on a roof damage claim?
Absolutely. In addition to that, interfering trades, and in addition to the normal issues you run into, is it covered? How do you fix it? How much does it cost? You're also getting into, there's a brand new argument I've seen alongside interfering trades, which is roof facets. So remember we covered earlier that a roof system is truly a system. Because it needs to be water shedding, you put it all on at once. And there's layers to it. There's different ways that building code specifies how the layers interact in order to keep water and moisture out of your home. So the thing is, the roofing facets argument that I've been seeing with Allstate is that they only owe to replace the facet that was damaged. But it's just not based in anything in the policy. And that's what we need to always be looking at.
They can be creative too. I learned something that I thought you would love to hear. Yesterday, I chatted with a gentleman who filed a water damage claim. His insurer denied it. And then he launched a campaign to convince them they were wrong. And he used ChatGPT to write his responses to the adjuster.
Yes.
And ChatGPT found citations to legal treatises and all kinds of ammunition. So there you go. I'm always looking for ways that technology might help the consumer, because there's so many ways that it's hurting the consumer.
Yeah.
And so there's a little tidbit for you. It's just been such a pleasure, Sarah. And we have another catch up with your buddy, Tim Johnson, about roof damage in Minnesota and the laws. So people will be able to watch this as well as his piece. There are some really wonderful people like Sarah out there that can be a resource for you. You're not alone. When you go up against an insurance company, you don't have to be alone. We certainly hope that, we always say this to you, we hope you don't need us, but if you do, we're here, and you'll be glad to know us and all the members of our family, like Sarah Parker with Parker Public Adjusting, who has been a volunteer with our organization, a supporter for many years, but who really is on the cutting edge of how insurers are handling roof damage claims in an era where they're getting more of them, and they're looking for ways to minimize what their payouts are. For you, the homeowner, know that there are the resources and help, and that's what we sought to bring you today. So thank you again, Sarah. Be safe. Stay off of those pitched roofs.
Yeah, especially, well, the snow's melting now, but yeah, also don't go on your roof in the winter. It's also good.
There you go. All right, that's a wrap on
Thank you.
Catching Up with Sarah Parker.